Hello, folks. And some of you I know I saw this morning at 11 o'clock. And if not, welcome to my shop for 4 o'clock. If you missed it this morning, we did, of course, I'm not sitting here with them. I did a pretty cool project, which was making coasters. And the concept was some project that you could easily make a lot of as a Christmas gift. I know it's only July, but like June 25th was like half Christmas, right? So Christmas isn't that far away, and we were trying to encourage you to get things going a little early so you're not in a last minute rush. So before we're done here, I'll grab the coasters. I got to remember where I put them from this morning, but I'll grab them and show them to you, and you can see if you like them, and then we can point you to where you can learn how to make them. As always, a big thank you to Titebond for sponsoring this and keeping it free for you folks. Speaking of the coaster thing that we did this morning, Barry has already put a comment in here today regarding some approaches for making these in a little bit different way. So if you watched me make square coasters this morning and you want to see Barry's suggestion on making round coasters, you can jump onto the live stream on WWGOA.com, and his comment is in the chat roll there, and you can see what Barry has got going for that. Then I'm going to jump in. So Wiley says, where does the strength of a mortise and tenon joint come from? Is it the thickness of the tenon or the width of the shoulders? Is there a useful rule of thumb on the ratio of tenon thickness to shoulder width? So let me grab a whiteboard. I got to think a second about where I left it last. And if I can't find a whiteboard, I'll just go with a board. All right. I bet I can find a piece of wood I can draw on. This lovely piece of pine will make a wonderful chalkboard. So let's try this. So mortise and tenon, let's test my 3D drawing here. So when you cut into, if this piece of pine were our cabinet rail, what we're looking to do is something like this. Where the tenon is projecting out of our rail. The general rule of thumb is for a tenon to be 1/3 T, 1/3 the thickness of the rail. So commonly in 3/4 inch stock, that would make the tenon 1/4 inch. That's 1/3 of 3/4. So what the math then is that shoulder is a 1/4 inch. The shoulder over on this side is a 1/4 inch. For me then, once I'm set up to cut so that I'm ending up with a 1/4 inch shoulder and a 1/4 inch shoulder here, then I do the same thing top and bottom. So the net is that's a 1/4 inch shoulder all the way around. So, well, then let's go one step further while I have this lovely drawing in front of you. And then that gives you the thickness of the tenon. Then for the length of the tenon, that should be 2 times the thickness. So again, if we do the math, in 3/4 inch stock, we would have a 1/4 inch thick tenon that then times 2 should be at least a 1/2 inch long. So let me go back and I'm going to double check on the question and make sure I actually answer it. All right, so Wiley says, where's the strength of a mortise tenon joint come from? Thickness of tenon or width of shoulders. Is there a useful rule of thumb on the ratio? So yeah, I think we got it there. I think we answered the question. So again, 1/3 the thickness. Now, if you get into a funky thickness of material, so let's say you have a rail that is a full inch thick. So 1/3 of an inch is 1/3 inch, 0.33. When it comes to making the mortise, I don't own a cutting tool that's a perfect 0.33, but I do have one that's 0.375. That's 3/8 of an inch. So you want to use a little bit of common sense with that. Another way to extend that rule is make your tenon 1/3 the thickness, rounded to the size of the nearest cutting tool. So if that rail is 13/16, don't get painted into a corner by dividing 13/16 by 3. You get some really weird number, and now you try to make the mortise that size. You always make the mortise first and make the tenon to fit it, and make the mortise using a cutting tool that's as close as possible to that ratio, that plan we just talked about there. Steve says, do you have specific recommendations for diamond sharpeners for carbide bits? So a couple things here. One, it's very interesting and it's great to know that you can sharpen carbide router bits here in your shop with a diamond cutter. With a diamond stone. So let me get a couple things going here. Over at my sharpening station. And then, because this is a cool thing to know about. Switch your cameras. In this case, that's a DMT stone. That's the brand. And I can look and see. This is a 1200 mesh diamond stone. Diamond is the only thing that's going to work on carbide, because diamond is harder than carbide. It's important with diamond stones to lubricate them. And there is what's called lapping fluid. That's a specific lubricant for diamond stones. I pretty commonly use water. That's what's in here. You got to do something. Otherwise, the swarf, which is what that's called, the stuff you're taking off here is going to clog up your stone. What's really, really, really important if you're going to do this is you have to count what you're doing. I'm laying the carbide face flat on the stone and then counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Rotate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's very, very important that you do the same thing to both wings in order to keep this balanced. If you don't pay attention to that, you're going to end up with a router bit that spins like me, eccentrically. So you got to make sure you count strokes. How do you know when you're done? In general, with cutting tools, you can test them by just dragging them across a fingernail. When I do this, I'm not pressing down. It's really just the weight of the router bit is engaged, is connected to my thumbnail. And when I do this, I can feel that carbide edge scoring, slightly scraping my thumbnail. And you can do that, pull a saw blade tooth across your nail, a router bit across your nail. In this case, I intentionally grabbed a straight bit because that's easy to do. If you've got a profiled cutter that's got a bearing on it, like a roundover or an OG, generally you have to take the bearing off, and then you can do what I just did here. You never mess with the bevel edge. You never mess with the profile. You always work on the flat face. So it's really very simple. As long as you're holding that carbide flat and you count strokes, you can really easily refresh, rejuvenate that edge. And with my dovetail jig, it's not uncommon. Like if I'm going to go up against a wood that has a tendency to be icky, so maple would be an example, birch would be an example, where they can be gnarly woods because of their really curly grain with a tendency to split, chip out. So I'll just preemptively do a couple swipes on my dovetail bit on a stone just to make sure I have the best possible edge. Net, like with my CNC machines, those bits get sent in to be sharpened in large part because many of those are spiral cutters, not straight cutters like this one I just showed you. So I get those professionally sharpened. Even this one, I'll hand hone it a few times, but eventually I'm going to send it into the pros because what they'll do is they'll match grind it. They'll make sure that they're taking the exact same amount off both cutters to make sure it's going to spin perfectly. If it spins off center, that's going to be really hard on your router. Oh, and I want to point out a couple cool things. So one, within the last few weeks when we've done live streams, people have mentioned they'd like earlier notice. So Katie is the smart one behind the boards who makes sure all this works. You may notice that you got emails today earlier than you previously did in regard to this morning's session at 11, and then also in regard to this one at 4 Central. So that's thanks to Katie. She's listening to what you're saying. The other thing, Katie, you got to put the link up again. She actually created a landing page, a hub page. And you can go onto that page anytime and see, like Katie and I have now scheduled the live streams for, I think, the next 3 months. So you can go on there and you can see time and date of all of the pending lives for the next 3 months. So, like I said, Katie's doing a good job of listening to your concerns over this stuff and taking care of that for you. All right. Richard says, hi, what method do you recommend to fix old wooden living room chair legs that have come undone? They were put together with round mortise and tenon joints. Some have come apart. There's also a block of wood on each corner at an angle screwed to the sides for strength. I think there's a better way. So I got to read this again. Round mortise and tenon, but with a block in there. So I don't think I've ever seen that. I think I've only seen reinforcement blocks on square corners. So I'm having a hard time visualizing that. We have a video in which I repair a round mortise and tenon joint. So it's like a living room chair or a kitchen chair, and it's, real typical look. I think there's a round or square leg. Bottom line is it's got a hole drilled in it, and then there's just a round spindle that's going to fit into that hole. So what happened over time is on that spindle, the tenon shrunk. So yellow glue is not going to be a repair for that, because with yellow glue, you have to have a really good fit. Typical woodworking glue, you have to have a really good fit between the components in order for that glue to work. So one approach to that, a gap filling glue, is 2-part epoxy. If you're cool with using 2-part epoxy to do a repair on your chairs, that's going to take care of it because it'll bridge any gap that you have in there. The downside to that is you're making that something nobody else can ever fix if they need to. There's really no reversing two-part epoxy other than sand it off, chisel it off, whatever. So on the chair that I did the video on, I think try just on GOA.com, try Googling chair repair. What I did was I took a scrap of wood and a hand plane and I got a shaving off of that scrap of wood. So of course that's like, you know, a tiny little roll of toilet paper. I got this tiny little shaving. Then I basically wrapped that around the tenon to see how much shaving do I need to add to that round tenon to make it a tight fit for which yellow glue will work, the yellow glue will work on when I put it all back together. Once I knew that, I could kind of cut that shaving to the right length to give me the right add-on to the tenon. Then I put glue on the tenon. As I wrapped the shaving around it, I put glue on the shaving. Then I put that all into the hole in the leg, clamped it, done. So what you're doing there, it's a cool approach, but I'm sure I stole from somebody else. You're basically adding like round veneer to that tenon. On a traditional mortise and tenon, if this happens, you can do the same thing. Traditional meaning square or rectangular. You can do the same thing by just gluing a piece of veneer onto the tenon to build it up and then go back and do your reassembly. So look for that video. And that was my resolution for it for that. That being said, I am not a furniture repair kind of guy by day or by night. So there might be better approaches out there. Gregory says, is there a good way to remove dried glue from parallel clamps other than physically scraping it off? Yes. So I have to think for a second. Tight Bond Bob was here for a live stream and a bunch of video work months ago, maybe a year ago now. And he laid that recipe on us. If anybody remembers what it is, put it in the comments here, because it's household stuff. It's like vinegar and water, but I think there's 3 components to it. And what you do is you put that on the beams of your clamps, and then I think wrap them in plastic, let it sit overnight, and the next day it's going to have softened the glue and it'll all peel off. So you could do this a couple ways. One, we can be at the mercy of somebody responding and telling us what that recipe was, or his video in which he tells us that is on WWGOA.com. So you could look for those videos where Bob is talking about removing glue from clamps and find it that way. But unfortunately, I don't remember what it is. Doug says, I just built a solid maple workbench and would like your suggestions for workbench vices. Well, I have a few vices: swearing, drinking, gambling. Workbench vices. I get it. There's an S in there, not a C in there. So I have on these benches, this is a Rockler vise. So let's see. Heavy bench. So metal mechanism, which is mounted to the bottom side of the bench. I made this jaw, and then there's a component there. Yeah, you can see that. There's a component there that I made. When I did this, I was looking for a couple things. I'm not going to put a vise on my bench that does not have quick release. So quick release is the action I just did, where when I turn this, I can rapidly open it. I can rapidly close it instead of just unwinding it and getting it where I want it to. Same once I'm squeezing something in there, I can use the quick action to get close, and then I can finish it with the thread on the vise. So before I had these on the big 4x8 workbench that used to be in here, I had a record, more of a steel-faced vise. They also fasten to the bench. They hang from the bench. That was fine as well. What I like about this one is it gives me a much bigger jaw. So it gives me a better grip on whatever I'm putting in there. But either one of those would work. That being said, this is a statistic of one. The record vise that I had was fine. It wasn't a new product. It was something that I got, I don't know where, at an auction or something. That might have been an 80-year-old vise that I had in here. And then when I was looking for vices, there are two of these benches in my shop. When I was looking to vise these, I knew somebody who had this Rockler bench or Rockler vise on their bench, and we were really happy with it. So that's what I went with for this. So it's not something I've done a lot of research on, but anecdotally, I can tell you that this Rockler vise works fine. I think they make two. I want to say they make a 9-inch and a 12-inch, and this is the 12. I think that's the distance from steel rod to steel rod in there. And I figured, go big or go home. I'm going to do this once. So I'm going to put the bigger of the two vices on. So like I said, anecdotally, I can tell you they worked really well for me. And Dennis commented about this morning. Great job. Thank you. It was fun. That coaster project was fun. And I will grab them and show them to you before we get out of here. Alex and Eli, who are Krista's nephews, are watching, and they say hello. So hello, Alex and Eli. Michael says, in California, you can no longer purchase denatured alcohol. How can I mix, dilute, or clean up shellac? Is this the end of shellac use? What's next? Other VOC containing finishes? Yeah, so in the end, I don't know. As far as I know, the only solvent for shellac is denatured alcohol. In the absence of that, you could probably dilute it with gin, which would be a waste of gin. I guess if you dilute it with Tanqueray, that's not really a waste because it's Tanqueray. Don't dilute it with good gin, like Hendrick's. But if you can't, we've seen this a couple times, we being Paul and I, who answer all the questions for GOA, this question has come in from California residents in the past. And, honestly, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what substitute solvent you could use. You could try, I would contact Zinsser, who makes seal coat, which is shellac. They make a lot of different shellacks, and ask them if there's an alternative that they can recommend that's still available in the state of California. Over the long haul, I don't know where this is all going to go. People I know who are in industry are rapidly moving toward more and more water-based finishes because of regulation against solvent-based finishes. So this is probably, is it going to continue? Probably. So where it's going to stop, I don't know. I'm not that tuned into what the EPA is doing. Ken says, tips or tricks for making my countersinks more uniform. I'm using a countersink bit, but they go from far too small to way too big in a heartbeat. So way too big, like too deep? Because I pretty routinely use a drill stop on my countersinks. I'll just where are we? The countersink component of this is this and this taper drill bit. The drill stop is this. I can remove that. So in the absence of that, you have to control manually how far you're going to punch the countersink component into your material. With that drill stop on there, of course, that collar is stopping at that depth every time. these are pretty commonly, the countersink itself is pretty commonly 3/8 of an inch in diameter. So if you get a 3/8 stop collar, you can fasten it on there. Double check that diameter before you buy your stop collar to make sure it's going to work. A lot of sets come with them, come with the collars. In your case, if it didn't, measure that diameter and then you can order yourself a stop collar like that. Someone in Wichita, Kansas is building 9 dresser drawers for a chest. Going to use 1/2-inch plywood. What's the strongest box joint to use? Well, a box joint is a strong joint. Finger joint is a strong joint. My go-to for this kind of stuff is a lock rabbet, and I've covered this miles and miles and miles on WWGOA because it's one of my favorite joints to use. With a lock rabbet, I'll go back to my lovely drawing board here. I've put together 11 billion plywood drawers this way. With a lock rabbet, the front of your drawer is going to look like that. Then the side of the drawer is going to look like that. We're effectively cutting a dado in the side and leaving a tongue. That's the rabbet part. We're leaving this tongue in the front and the back. So mechanically, this engages here in the side. It also increases your glue surface area. So if you think about this, pulling in this direction, even in the absence of glue, you can't pull this apart because we're pulling that rabbeted component against the dado that it's locked into. You make these with a 1/4-inch slot cutter and a router table. Once you're set up, it's incredibly fast to cut. It's a really, really good way to put drawer boxes together. I do that all the time in Baltic birch plywood, multi-ply plywood. And like I said, it's really, really fast. I've got lots of tutorials on GOA. Like I said, I use that all the time, and I've covered that a lot on video on WWGOA. Eli says, what's your favorite use for epoxy in woodworking projects? So that's a great question. I am not a river table kind of a guy. I am an epoxy as a finish kind of guy. So really, I see epoxy in my arsenal of stains and top coats. And, am I going to use boiled linseed oil or aqua coat as a top coat? Am I going to add color to my project with stain or aniline dye or epoxy? The other benefit we can get from it is, it's very waterproof. So am I in a scenario where a conventional sealer isn't necessarily going to give me what I want? I want to make it more like a boat. I want to really make it waterproof. And that's where epoxy can come in, because basically you're covering whatever you're doing with liquid plastic. I don't know that, I've never done a river table. I've done very few projects where I've completely covered like a tabletop with tabletop epoxy, but I've done lots and lots and lots of stuff where I've added it as an accent because I love the look of color you can get from it. I love what it can bring to a project. I also see it as a great way to facilitate repairs. So I'm one to not cut around knots or wane or sapwood. I love leaving that stuff in the project. If you've got a knot that's a hole, a great example is I made a desk for my middle kid, Ginny. If you've been watching a long time, you've seen Ginny work with me in the shop. Her desk was beautiful piece of maple full of wormholes. So not very practical as a desk because it's got all these little wormholes in it. So I painstakingly filled every one of those wormholes with 2-part epoxy before I finished the desk. So it would be one continuous surface when it was done. So for me, like I said, it's very much a problem solver, more so than a project unto itself. So Katie has put the live schedule in the chat roll. So this would be a great thing if you like watching these lives and you want to stay tuned in to exactly when they're going to happen and who else I'm having on. Going to have a guest in August, so you're going to want to watch that one. Just bookmark that hub page, that landing page where Katie's got the live stream schedule, and then you can always reference that to see what's coming up. Wiley says, if I have to fudge on the 1/3 ratio, do I fudge the tenon thicker or thinner? I would make it thicker. So same with rounding to get to the nearest cutter. Don't round down and make the tenon smaller. Round up and make the tenon and the companion mortise more bigger. Dave says, can you comment on paste wax versus glide coat or the DuPont product? So Dave must have been watching previously. So the first part of this is glide coat or the DuPont product. This is a good show and tell day. Coming right back. Coming right back. Don't leave. Coming right back. If you've been watching me for a while, you have seen me use glide coat many, 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 many times. This is it. This is a lubricant that I spray on every tool surface in my shop. Joiner bed, planer bed, table saw fence, router bases, dovetail jig surface. A while ago, I don't know, 6 months ago, when I went to buy it on Amazon, the price had really gone through the roof. I found this DuPont product, which is similar. The benefit to both of these is they don't have silicone in them. These are tool-specific lubricants. When you spray them on, then it leaves behind a lubricant, a liquid flashes off, you kind of buff it out, you polish it out, and it'll leave that lubricant behind. You don't want to use anything that's got silicone in it, because that silicone can migrate into your work, and you're going to find that out when you go to put finish on. The silicone is effectively pre-finished your wood for you, and then finish won't stick. Comparing that to paste wax, I am too lazy to use paste wax. So this, for me, this started 40 years ago. That's kind of incredible. When I started working for Shopsmith, and the Shopsmith tables are aluminum and they're ribbed. So there's a high and a low, and a high and a low, and a high and low. Now, same deal, aluminum, like cast iron, is a very porous surface. If you just leave it, there's some resistance to pushing your material across it. So you really want to get a lubricant on there. You don't have to protect it from rust, it's aluminum, but you want to make it easier for your material to slide across. So the Shopsmith thing at that time was Johnson Carnauba-based paste wax. And because of those ribs, it was a huge pain in the butt, because you'd end up with wax down in all those low spots, and you had to very meticulously take a rag and clean that out. Otherwise, dust is going to stick to it. It's like leaving, I don't know, grease down in there. So back with Shopsmith, it was the early version of glide coat. I believe it was called top coat. It was an aerosol product. I found that, and I quit using the Carnauba-based paste wax because it was so much easier to put on the aerosol top coat, which eventually changed its name to glide coat. That's what I still have today. So both are great. Either one is great. The moral of the story out of this is you should definitely be lubricating your tools. Two things: makes them work much better. If you've never done it and you get a can of glide coat or the DuPont stuff and you put it on, you're going to be amazed at how much more readily your rip fence moves, the material feeds, just everything is easier. Remember I said the bottom of a router and the top of a dovetail jig, boy, does that make a difference in getting that router to travel. The other thing is with cast iron surfaces, this time of year, when the humidity is high, then you can get rust just from ambient humidity in the air. You can get rust on your cast iron. Having those surfaces sealed is going to help prevent that. So they all work great. I'm just too lazy to use paste wax. Jay asks, do you have a dehumidifier in your shop? Should someone in the Midwest considering getting one? So in my old shop, where if you're looking at videos that don't look like this in the background, those were shot in my old shop. I did have a dehumidifier in there because I had a window air conditioner in there that was marginal. It could barely keep up. I rarely used it. Basically, it was there just for video shoots because the windows can't be open during a video shoot. So in that building, I ran a dehumidifier. So the answer is yes. If it's really high humidity, I just talked about the effect of humidity on your cast iron tools. It's also affecting your material. If you're running a dehumidifier in your house or an air conditioner, same thing, and you're building furniture for your house, you want to simulate that environment here. In this shop, I've got an air conditioner. I'm not a huge fan of running it. I had all the doors in this place open as long as I could today. Basically, because of the live streams, I close the doors because it's loud. But I try to not use the air conditioner any more than I have to. But I can tell when the humidity is getting too high in here, it's weird. Even though I treat my cast iron, it gets kind of a gray look to it that tells me I've got too much humidity in here. So then I run the air conditioner primarily just to pull the humidity level down. So H is saying acetone, water, and vinegar. That's the comment. I'm assuming that's the solution for getting glue off your clamps. Otherwise, it's an interesting comment. But I think that kind of rings a bell. It kind of rings a bell as far as when Bob was here and he was talking about getting the glue off your clamps. And I don't know if it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It's worth looking up that video to check. Dave says, doesn't it make sense to match humidity to the location the project will be in? Yes. So that's that point I was just making. You know, in the wintertime, when it's 20 below outside here, yuck. That's why the material comes into my shop. You know, and then you can ask the opposite question. Do I humidify in the winter? Yes, because this building is separate from the house. And there's no humidifier on the furnace. The furnace is on the roof. So in the winter, I add humidity to the air. Does a couple things. One, it makes it way more comfortable to work in here. It matches this environment to where the stuff is going to live after it's built. And you'll also find if you've not been humidifying your shop, it helps keep dust down. When it's real dry in your shop, the dust kind of floats around more. When the humidity is at the right level, it falls out of it's kind of helping the dust fall out of the air. Making sure I'm not missing one. Okay. Dennis says, I was given a large pin oak to cut into round cookies, 4 to 10 inches thick, 48 inches and 24 inches in diameter. What can I do with it besides firewood? Well, cutting cookies is cool. So cookies or log rounds are when you just take the log and you cross cut it. So that's a crazy easy way to make tables. Once that wood is dry, you could put 3 hairpin legs or 3 legs of your choice under that, and then you've got a table. You're done. It's pretty cool rustic furniture. It's kind of a caribou coffee style design, kind of a caribou coffee aesthetic. So that's one thing. If you've got log left, I've got all sorts of logs to lumber stuff on the site. So that is another thing, is with a chainsaw, with a bandsaw, with a sawmill, you can cut planks out of it and then make stuff that way as well. Roger says you can also use acetone to dilute shellac. I can neither confirm nor deny. So I don't know. I don't know that. I've never heard that before. Good question for Zinzer. And my other question out of that would be, if you can't get denatured alcohol, is pretty benign compared to acetone. If you can't get denatured alcohol, I'm guessing you can't get acetone either. So I don't know. Alex and Eli say, how old is the scroll saw in my shop? Not too. So I think I've had that. I'm kind of like a, like BCAD for me is OSNS, old shop, new shop. Yeah, I had the scroll saw in the old shop. So that means it's more than 11 years old, because my kid, George Jr., did a video on that scroll saw, which speaks to the next part of the question. Is that a good way to get kids interested in woodworking? Yes, because it's a very benign tool. Like, I don't want to say you can't cut your finger on it, because you could probably cut your finger on anything if you work at it hard enough. But it's a pretty safe tool to use. It's a fun tool to use because you can just freehand cut a lot of stuff. George made something I can't remember. I cut chess pieces on that scroll saw. So it's pretty cool. You cut three-dimensionally. It's like compound cuts on a bandsaw. You cut from this face to a pattern, turn it 90 degrees, cut that face to a pattern, and you end up with chess pieces. So that's another thing. Oh, Henry's holding me to the wall here. Speaking of boats, is the canoe in the water? Not yet. So the problem with the canoe is, like, that's a side hustle project, not side hustle that I'm selling it, but my day job is all this woodworking that I'm doing all day, every day. The canoe is a very labor intensive project that I want to get done because I want to get it on the water. The canoe is at a point where I'm currently sanding the inside of it. When that's sanded, my friend Mark, who has a lot of boat building experience, is going to come back. He helped me epoxy the outside. Epoxying the inside with epoxy and fabric is even harder because it's shaped like this. So you have to pull everything up the sides. He's going to come back and help do that. Then I do the seats, the gunnel, the breastplate, the breast hook on each end. So, I'm close. But part of what I was going like crazy on the canoe, and then I did this camper upgrade project that I had to put the canoe aside because the camper upgrade video series was crazy labor intensive. So the canoe got set aside to do that, which means it got put in storage outside of my shop, and out of sight, out of mind, which kind of speaks to Mark's question. What upcoming project has you excited? I'm working on a stand-up paddleboard. This is a video series that I'm doing. So you'll see all of this. It's built like a cedar strip canoe. I'm going to go and get it and bring it over here because it's pretty cool. If you were watching the live stream, I don't know, a month-ish ago, you saw the stand-up paddleboard because I used it as a desk in that live stream. So let me see if I can do this without dropping anything important. Hold, please. Coming right back. Hang on. Hang on. Hang on. Hang on. I haven't left you. All right, here we go. Had to move a few things. So this, my friends, is the stand-up paddleboard. 11 feet, 4 inches long. This is a kit. Jarvis Boards is the kit company. The kit components you can no longer see. There's a skeleton inside here, a plywood skeleton inside here. It's all laser cut, and it's a tab A, slot B kind of a thing. It all comes in a 4-foot package, but we're building a 12-foot paddleboard. So you snap everything together, and then I used a product called Thixo, Thixo. It's a total boat product, comes in a caulk tube, and it goes through a cool spiral tip. So as you squeeze the caulk tube, it's mixing. That's how I glued that whole frame, the substructure together. And then like a cedar strip canoe, the strips come over that. This is a mix of cedar, maple, walnut, bloodwood, maple, and then the nose and the tail. Let me see if I can get that for you, because they're crazy cool. If I can do this without dropping it. The nose and the tail are lacewood. The shaping is not done on that. Obviously, I've still got a lot of work to do on that. But this is pretty far along. I'm at a stage where I'm hand planing these rails to match the top and the bottom. Then really this gets a final sanding and it's ready for epoxy. So my current agenda is I need to get these done. I'm making 2 of them, and they're very space intensive in my shop. So I need to get these done, get them out of here. The canoe is going to come back in because that's going to force me to work on it, and then work on it to get it out of my way. And then I'll get Mark back here in order to help me do the inside and get that thing done. So these, I can't wait to get fiberglass on these, because like any woodworking project, when stuff gets wet with finish, that's when it really starts to look snappy. The second paddleboard is getting African black limba nose and tail. It'll have a little bit different look to it. So this has been cool. It's been fun to do. We don't know if we think we're going to like paddleboarding. We own a canoe. We each own a kayak. So we're on the water a lot. So I'm looking forward to this. I guess it's a lot of core. So we'll see if this old guy can take that or not. So Roger says he always uses acetone to dilute shellac for 20 years, and you can still get it in California. Gregory says, is there a difference between AWFS and IWF? So if you're not familiar, every year there's a big woodworking show. We're in an even year. In even years, it's IWF, International Woodworking Fair. That's at the Georgia Dome, Georgia World Conference Center, whatever it's called, in Atlanta. AWFS, I don't remember what that stands for, is in Las Vegas. So they're very similar. For the most part, what happens there is a couple of different things. On a big industrial scale, companies that make $500,000 CNC machines set up those machines, and it's like one machine that's as large as my shop, and they have them running. There's a pile of sheet stock being fed in and cabinets coming out the other side, and they're using that as a means by which people can come, tire kick the machine, hopefully place an order and sell them. And both shows that's happening, both shows, those kind of companies from all over the world, European, Asian, United States, wherever they're based, are coming and setting up their equipment, and people can come and see it run. The people more in our world, like home hobbyist level woodworking manufacturers, set up a booth, and historically, this is when they roll out their new products. So woodworking Woodworking, whoa, kind of has a season. Most people consider it fall, winter, spring. So the shows are generally late summer. IWF is this year in August. The first day, I think, is August 6th or so. So they roll out their new products looking for that information to get out to the public going into the fall woodworking season. So at this point, it used to be that IWF was quite a bit bigger than AWFS. I think at this point, they're pretty much the same in size, and similar companies are represented at each one. All that being said, it's worth looking at the attendee list, the vendor list, if you're planning on going, just to see if the people you want to see are going to be there. One of the things that happened with COVID is these shows didn't happen during COVID, and a lot of companies found other ways to market. So they came to realize they don't need the expense of sending a lot of people to the show, setting up a huge booth. I mean, this could be tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars for companies to have a appearance, have a booth at the show. So it's something that you want to check out who's going to be there if you're looking for a specific tool. But typically, SawStop, Harvey Tools, Tight Bond, most of the usual suspects are there. Will I be at IWF this year? Yes. I am going to be there. I got to think a second. I'll be in the show Tuesday and Wednesday, not in a booth, walking around, talking to all the people I just told you about, and then leaving Thursday, if I remember my schedule correctly. So I'll be there, and then, like I said, be there for a couple of days. Clayton says, I'm doing a jumbo bandsaw reindeer out of a 6x10 beam. Moist Doug fir, I'm guessing. How do I avoid pinching when making cuts? So pinching because it's green. So I think maybe what you need to do is cut some tiny little wedges and then cut a little bit and stick a wedge in there, cut a little bit, stick a wedge in there, cut a little bit, stick a wedge in there. And that'll keep that kerf open as you're working through the cuts. All right. I kept promising I was going to show you the coasters, and it's nearly 5 bells. So these are they. This is the project I did live this morning. Those have finish on them, same thing with no finish on it. So what's cool about this is it looks complicated with those stripes in there. It's a very, very, very simple process. If you want to see that, how that's done, there's a PDF guide, a how-to packet that goes with this, and then a live stream that showed that this morning. Then the other thing is check out that hub, the landing page that Katie created. That's got everything detailed with a schedule of live streams so that you can see what's coming up. Also, everybody can thank Katie for getting the notifications out earlier today than has been happening previously. So hopefully that's better at giving you a notification that we're going to go live, like in the future, not in 30 seconds. So give you a little bit more advance notice on that. As always, thanks to, I can never find the poster, thanks to Tight Bond for sponsoring this. Advance warning, this in August, is going to be a week later than normal. So speaking of IWF, Krista and I are going to be at IWF. We won't be here. So the live stream in August is not the second Thursday, it's the third Thursday. And I'm planning on a guest for that. Not going to say who yet, but watch for information about that. If the guest thing comes through, it's going to be very, very, very fun. Couple more questions. Gregory says, when trying to cut 90 degrees on a chop saw, is there an easy way to remember what way to rotate the bed if the miters are less or more than 90 degrees? Well, I think of it as let's see if I can draw this in a helpful way. So if I make this cut, if I make a cut, and I'll just grossly exaggerate, and it's like that, so it's clearly not 90 degrees. If this is sitting on the miter saw, what that shows me is I have to take more off of this part. So the head of the miter saw has to come this way in order to take more off that side of the cut. If alternatively, the cut comes out like this, the table on the miter saw, the bevel, the angle, has to come this way to take more off of there to turn that into a 90-degree cut. And then make the correction, test it again, and if it's worse, you went the wrong way. Ken says, oh, we answered that one about the 1/2-inch plywood. All right. Well, as always, thanks to Typon, thanks to Katie, who's behind the scenes and making sure all of this stuff absolutely works correctly and feeds like it's supposed to. Watch the schedule for that August live. Like I said, I'm going to have a guest. Plan on having a guest at that. Other than that, thanks for watching. As always, check out the coaster live stream if you're interested in those. Check out the landing page and the live schedule so you know what's going on. And Katie can punch us out.